practitioner along with other healing modalities, his main area of interest lies in creating curriculums around the inner self and talking about the need for these conversations to become an integral aspect of an educational institution's learning environment. He works with children, teachers, and parents on understanding this need by using storytelling, performance, and painting as a way of engaging with parts of ourselves to build a deeper knowing of what lies within. I would now like to request Mr. Sahil for taking out. I would now like to request Mr. Sahil to take over and inspire and guide all of us by shedding light on today's topic, teaching self-compassion as a primary human virtue.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. I'm not so sure if I can inspire, but I think what I'm really going to do today is to share some of the experiences, that I've had, and what really is self-compassion, and what is my understanding of self-compassion, and how can one learn and teach self-compassion as a primary human virtue. Before I sort of move into that, I just want to acknowledge how wonderful it is to come back here, to H.R.College. Okay, so I'm also the host, so I seem to be admitting the people. Can someone take that responsibility away from me?
No, you'll get the notifications, but I am handling that, so no
Okay,
worries.
awesome, awesome. Okay, great. So yeah, so it's absolutely wonderful to sort of be here and to really share the space, even if it is in a virtual and a digital sense. But HR College has given me a lot, and I think that like a lot of the speakers probably must have acknowledged and shared with you, it really was the cornerstone, for my journey. And when I look back at some of the pillars in my life, I think HR College and my experience, just being, within the college and interacting with all of my peers, was in fact one of the most enriching experiences, that I've ever had. And if there's one thing that I can sort of really urge all of you to do, is to really make the most of these 3 years, 4 years, that you have in college, and to really take as much as you can, and really just go with it. So with that, I'd like to sort of start today's session. And today I'm going to speak to you about my own journey and my own understanding of what self-compassion is. Even though I'm offering you a way, and I'm offering you a way that has worked for me, I'm going to urge you to question this approach. I'm going to urge you to listen to yourself and to trust that voice inside of you that knows what its truth is. I urge you to ask as many questions as you want to, as many questions as you can, even if it means completely dissecting what I have proposed. If something that I say does not resonate with you, I invite you to question it, to acknowledge it, to acknowledge that it is not okay, so that we may unravel it together. I promise in this moment to be completely present to each and every one of you that are here in this 1.5 hours. I promise to be as open as I can to the questions that you may have. And in this moment, I hope that we can create a space where questioning what is carries no shame and no judgment. In the spirit of questioning lies our own individual truth. And let us arrive at our own individual truth with joy, with understanding, with love, and with all the intensity that we can offer. So having said that, I'd like all of you to quickly do a feelings check-in, what I call as a feelings check-in. So if all of you can just quickly pop on to the chat how it is that you're feeling in one word or two, maybe a sentence. So I'm just going to start by saying excited and nervous. Okay. If we can have a couple of responses as well. Just a very, very quick feeling check-in just to see how everyone is feeling. Stressed, okay? I acknowledge that, Josiah. I acknowledge that you're stressed. Joyful, wonderful. Tired, okay. Fresh, okay, that's great. If you can just, if you can change the settings to everyone so that all of us can have a look at the chat.
Yeah, I have done that. I have done that already.
Okay, great. Lazy. Okay, wonderful. Excited. Lazy, of course. Great. It's 3:45, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Yes, I totally acknowledge your laziness. Positive. That's great. Ambitious but burnt out. Okay. Okay, I acknowledge that. I acknowledge your burnout. I acknowledge your fatigue. I am very curious about how you're feeling ambitious in this moment, but let's maybe talk about that later. Okay, wonderful. So what is it really that I want to talk to you today about, right? What is self-compassion? Now, this is just me essentially talking to you about my story. This is me telling you the things that I have done and that I do in order to be able to practice self-compassion. And through that, I hope that you are able to understand that it is not a moment of enlightenment. I'm not saying that it cannot be. But what I am saying is that self-compassion can be started in small ways and in the small things that we do. And when we really start focusing on those small things that we can do, we create more room for who we are. And when we create more room for who we are, we can create more room for others in our lives. Now, self-compassion, according to me, is directly linked to acceptance. It is linked to understanding that we have come from so many different places, so many different experiences that have shaped us into people that we have either come to be very fond of or people that we don't really like. And according to me, self compassion is linked to a deep sense of understanding and empathy towards all of those parts of ourselves. That can only happen when we acknowledge all those parts of ourselves that we also don't really like. The part of ourselves that we reject, either because of the fear of being judged, because of facing rejection, because of not feeling belonged, either amongst our friends or our family. What we do is we create an ecosystem within us that works against us, slowly suppressing our true nature. Now, in order to understand this further, I feel like it is important to understand that facing rejection is not a nice feeling. It is not a pleasant feeling, right? Being alone, not feeling belonged somewhere is not a happy thought or a happy feeling. So it is only natural for us to want to avoid that feeling, to avoid situations that might cause that unpleasant feeling. And I propose a path. And that path is that in order to achieve self compassion, it is those very things that we avoid, those very things that we do not listen to, that can really bring us closer to who we are. And when we become closer and when we come closer to who we are, and we operate from that place of being, we then give ourselves the opportunity to create a more authentic world. Now, I understand that a lot of this is abstract. A lot of this is, just is just really understanding parts of ourselves, or maybe not understanding those parts of ourselves that that we really thought we knew. But it is about embracing this abstraction. It is about understanding all of these things within yourself have meaning. And my life is dedicated towards uncovering these aspects of myself that I have not seen. And in some way, help others in whatever way I can to do the same. Now, it is not an easy journey, if I'm completely honest with you, because one has to constantly come face to face with society's conditioning, with experiences that are not yours, with what others are thinking and feeling, and constantly trying to separate that from what it is that you're feeling. So, how many of you feel that way? Like when in a moment you have realized that this thought that just came to you right now is not your thought, but has been planted by someone else. And if that has happened to you at any time in your life, I just want you to acknowledge that on the chat. Just maybe type in a yes and say, a hell yes. Okay, yes, great. Yes, with an exclamation mark. Wonderful. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, I acknowledge all of the yeses. I acknowledge all of the yeses. And I put in a big yes as well. Oh, wait. Yeah. Now I understand and I acknowledge that we have felt this way and that we do feel this way. Now, this path to self-compassion that I am proposing, it requires patience and it requires commitment. And these two qualities of patience and commitment have been the two pillars in my life, are the two pillars in my life, both of which I've had to cultivate and I have not intrinsically had. I might have had patience when it comes to somebody else, when it comes to listening to someone's problems, when it comes to somebody coming to me and asking me for advice and guidance. Yes, I have a lot of patience when it comes to that. But do I really have that same kind of patience for myself? Am I really that patient with myself? The same kind of patience that I exercise with everybody who walks into my life. Am I able to exercise the same kind of patience for myself? And in this moment, if I ask myself this question, the resounding answer is no. I don't have that level of patience and that kind of patience for me because I'm constantly in a hurry to get somewhere. And ever since I have learned this path of self acceptance and of self compassion, I am now in a hurry to be self accepting of myself. And now I'm in a hurry to be compassionate towards myself. So, what my biggest lesson and what my biggest learning is that in order to be able to accept myself in a hurry, I'm not accepting myself. So, the patience and commitment for oneself and really slowing down and reminding yourself that it is okay. Wherever you are, at whatever stage of your life right now that you're at, is where you are meant to be, and that it is okay for you to be here. Now, I am not saying that it means that you just sit back and say, oh, this is wonderful, and I don't have to do anything about it, and this can be great, and everyone just has to do everything else, and I can just sit here and relax. And that's not what I'm proposing. Acceptance is understanding without letting those external voices deter you in a particular direction and allowing yourself to sit with yourself in that moment and saying that it is okay for me to be where I am. I do want to get somewhere. I do have a sense of purpose. But right now, in this moment, wherever it is that I am, it's fine. And I know that it sounds really simple, right? And it sounds like it logically and intellectually, it sounds like a very, very simple exercise to do. But that is perhaps one of the hardest things that we can offer ourselves. It is perhaps one of the toughest things that we can do with ourselves. But the toughest is the most important thing that we must do. And so now I'm going to do a little exercise with all of you. Okay, this is, I call this exercise connecting to the wise one. Okay, now I acknowledge that there is a wise person inside of me. Now, this wise person, I have given this person a form, a voice, I've given him a shape, I've given him a color. This person inside of me sometimes is a man, is a woman, sometimes is a girl, is a boy, keeps changing form, keeps changing textures, keeps changing colors. But I know anytime I need to speak to this wise one, he or she will be there. Okay. Now, this wise one for me is this voice of wisdom. Anytime that I am confused and anytime that I am lost in some way, I just connect to the wise one and I leave all of my problems to this wise one. So, right now, in this moment, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Wherever you are right now, just close your eyes and take a couple of deep breaths into your heart. Take a deep inhalation. And maybe exhale with your mouth open and see your breath settle in into your heart. And now take another deep inhalation. Really feel your breath expand in your lungs. Feel it maybe expand in your shoulders. And hold it there for a moment. And as you release, release with a deep exhalation into your heart. And I'm going to invite you to ask this question. And keep your eyes closed as you ask yourself this question. Who is this person inside of you that resides deep within, that knows who you are? Now, this could be a person with a form, with a full-fledged form, or it could just be a voice. Whatever it is, let it be that. Now, how do you feel in your body when you connect with this voice? If you had to place your hand somewhere in your body where you can feel this person, this voice, this form inside of you in this moment, where do you feel it? What kind of sensation does this have? Is it a warm sensation? Can you put your palms, your hands, can you keep your palms on that part of you right now? And can you acknowledge this voice? Can you acknowledge this wise one that knows who you are and is willing to guide you? Now, can you give, if I were to ask you to give this voice or this person a form or a shape, can you find it within yourself to give this voice a shape right now? Let it be the first shape that comes to your mind. Don't think too much about it. Just connect with whatever shape that comes to you first. And now, can you give this shape a color? Just intuitively pick a color for this shape, for this form that is inside of you. And if you found that shape, and if you found that color, I'm going to ask you to take a paper, and if you have pastels and crayons or anything around you, to just draw that shape and to add that color onto that shape without lifting your crayon or your pastel off the paper. Now let's take a couple of minutes to gather that pastel to that crayon, that piece of paper, and to just draw that in front of you. The only rule for this is that you don't lift the crayon or the pastel off the paper. That ensures your connection to that voice. If you don't have a crayon, if you don't have a pastel, if you just want to use a pen or a pencil, you're most welcome to do that. If you have colors, and if it's not going to take you long to take those colors, then I urge you to take a color. And as you draw this shape and this color onto the paper, just pay attention and become aware of how you feel in your body as you see this form in front of you. And if you feel ready right now, and if you would like to share, then you can just pop up what the experience was for you on the chat. You can just quickly write, maybe in a sentence, were you able to connect with this voice? What was that voice like? What was the shape? What was the color? How did you feel as you connected with this voice? And if you didn't connect with this voice, and if you weren't able to find this voice, that's fine as well. And that's okay. And just know that this voice is inside of you, easily accessible at any point. So, can we have a couple of sharings maybe on the chat? For those of you who are able to do this, for those of you who connected with this. Okay? Very calm, and Aditi has said very calm and very relaxing, felt positive. Wonderful. Found a new best friend. Wonderful. That is great, Pooja. I acknowledge that. Relaxed. Okay. Masira has said relaxed. I felt wise myself. Yes, felt positive. Okay, wonderful. Prem has said soothing and energetic. Great. I acknowledge that, Prem. Relaxed, says Josia. Okay, wonderful. Thank you guys for sharing. Now just know that this voice, this person, this form inside of you is available for you at any time during the day or the night. And whenever you feel lost and whenever you feel confused, I would urge you to just sit and have a conversation with this voice. And that is the only thing that I have done. Any time that I have felt confused and any time that I have felt lost in a certain sense, I have just connected with this voice. And then I have trusted that whatever it is that this voice is going to tell me is going to be for my best interest. So for me, the intuitive voice, the voice of my wise one, is a circle, and it is a revolving circle. And it is the color is yellow and orange. And every time I look at that revolving circle, I feel and I'm reminded of the movement, of the rhythm that is lies within me, that I am constantly moving, that I am constantly dynamic. And that for me is a beautiful reminder of this source of life within me. Now, in the effort to talk about self compassion, in the path to self compassion, it is important to acknowledge rejection and judgment. And why does it become necessary to talk about rejection and judgment? And why do rejection and judgment really affect us as much as they do? Now, I'm going to ask you to look at the word rejection and judgment in itself, just the word, and just become aware of the feeling and the sensation in your body as you look at this word rejection and as you look at this word judgment. See the image that rejection and judgment bring to you. Now, for this purpose and for the sake of today, as an experiment, I'm going to ask you to look at these words without the image that they evoke in you. Let us look at these words, let us look at rejection, and let us look at judgment as observers and see where that takes us. Now, I have come to understand that the reason why we feel rejected And the reason why we do judge ourselves is because we have turned all the resources that we require for feeling belonged, for feeling loved, for feeling appreciated externally, isn't it? Think about it. From the time that we were born, we have somehow internalized that safety and security comes from outside. Now, there is no doubt that when we were babies, when we were kids, we did need to rely on safety and security from outside. We needed to be fed, we needed to be nourished, we needed to feel secure and safe in the comfort of our homes and an extended community. So it doesn't make sense for us to look at rejection and the desire to feel belonged from the lens of judgment. Let us not judge these parts of ourselves. Now, I'm going to ask you to ask yourself, when have you felt rejected? When do you feel rejected? And if you're comfortable, I'm going to ask you to just maybe write it down on the chat. And I'm going to start by saying that I feel rejected when I offer my love to someone and they don't receive it. Now, whatever is true for you, when my ideas don't get executed, absolutely, I acknowledge that sort of. I feel rejected when someone doesn't understand me. Absolutely. Absolutely, Ansh. Niharika says, when my hard work doesn't pay off. Absolutely. Divya says, I feel rejected when I care for someone and they don't. I'm with you. I feel rejected when I'm hardworking, but this isn't considered. Absolutely, Pooja. I acknowledge that. Josia says, when I don't feel fully involved. Absolutely. Darshana says, I feel rejected when my efforts are not counted by someone. Absolutely. Absolutely. Prem says, I feel rejected when people don't reciprocate my behavior. Sure. I acknowledge all of that. And now I'm going to tell you guys a little story. Okay. But this is going to be a story in which I need you to sort of participate with me. We're going to go on this journey, and this journey is, well, it involves me. But I have a feeling that some of you, or maybe all of you, might resonate with a lot of this story. And whatever comes up in this story that might be true for you, I want you to just stay with that. Some of it might be true for you, some of it might not be true for you. And whatever it is that is coming up is valid, and just stay with that. And for this story, I'm going to need you to close your eyes. Just close your eyes and be with me as I am with you. I'm going to invite you to visualize a small child. Now, this child is about 7 to 8 years of age. And I want you to see yourself standing or maybe sitting close to this child. For the sake of this story, let's just assume that this child is a boy. And I'm going to ask you to just see this boy lying down on his bed. He opens up his eyes and he spends a couple of minutes on his bed just looking up at the ceiling. And he remembers that this is his first day of school. Now imagine that you are right beside this child. You are by his bedside. And for the sake of the story, let's call this child Bloom. Now Bloom walks up to his parents. Let's say that his parents are supportive. They greet him with love and with warm hugs because they understand that he is scared. They let him know that it is okay for him to be scared. And I want you to just stay with this child as he travels from his home to the gate of his school, where Bloom stands outside of the school and sees a lot of children, some who are dressed like him and some who are dressed differently. He looks back at his parents and he sees their smiling faces. He is scared. He takes a deep inhalation and heaves out a sigh. And he walks up to the school. Now he goes inside sitting next to a person who's extremely chatty and who happens to know a lot of people. And remember that you are with Bloom. You are standing right beside Bloom. Just become aware of how Bloom could be feeling in this moment. He looks up at this boy sitting next to him and suddenly looks down in fright. He tells himself that he's going to pass by this time with bated breath and that he's just going to wait for the breakfast break. And in this school, there's a breakfast break. So now Bloom and you walk by to the canteen and they sit down on a table. And he sees a group of people who walk and sit right next to him. Now I want you to just stay with Bloom and see what happens in your body as you see this group of people just approaching the table that Bloom is sitting on. Can you notice maybe your palms or your hands? And in this moment, can you feel that sensation of anticipation that Bloom might be feeling? Can you, for this moment, just imagine, even if you have to just imagine, what Bloom could be experiencing? Now, Bloom looks at everybody who sits next to him and gently shifts his gaze towards the food that they're all sharing. He brings his attention to his tiffin box and what he's got from home, and he feels a little ashamed. He feels ashamed because he's thinking to himself, what if people make fun of me? Now, I want you to just stay with this thought. If you're able to see this mind, if you're able to see this in your mind and you fancy yourself a director, just freeze this frame and stay with this question. What if people make fun of me? Now, maybe Bloom has been you, or you have been Bloom at some point in your life. Now, ask yourself this question. What if people make fun of me? What if people don't accept me? Maybe you can feel a sensation in your body as you ask yourself this question. And if you're feeling this somewhere in your body, I'm going to ask you to go back to Bloom in this moment. Just go back to Bloom and just whisper to him, it's okay, Bloom. You are accepted. Now I want you to take your hand and I want you to place it on that part of your body where you felt that sensation. And wherever it is that you felt that sensation, I want you to take a deep breath and just say to yourself, don't worry, I got you. And if you feel like saying that out aloud, I urge you to say it out aloud to yourself. Listen to yourself. Say, don't worry, I got you. And whenever you feel ready, I'm going to ask you to just open your eyes and let's have a quick sharing on the chat as to how it was. Did something come up for you? Is there anything that you would like to share? Is there anything that you would like to say? Just please feel free to share that on the chat. Okay, Pooja says amazing. Okay, I acknowledge that, Pooja. Relieved. Okay, wonderful. Comforting. Absolutely. Relieved. Yes, I acknowledge that. Whatever it is that you're feeling, it's completely all right, even if this didn't resonate with you. You're most welcome to share that on the space. Whatever it is for you, whatever your experience was, I urge you to share it. Okay, it was initially a sinking feeling, which later became a lighter feeling, like a weight lifted off. Absolutely, Pooja, I acknowledge that. And that's wonderful. Okay. Okay, Aditi says felt. All right, great. If you would like to elaborate what that means, Aditi, that would be wonderful. But if you feel like you want us to decipher it, that's also fine. I don't know, but the story felt to be my story, and now it's like I could do it. Absolutely. Absolutely. I acknowledge that. Yes, I acknowledge that. Okay, cool. So I think it's important for us to understand. Felt connected to it. Aditi says, felt connected to it, comforting. Okay. So I think it's important for us to understand that as much as we need an external validation system, we also need an internal validation system, right? We need to constantly remind ourselves and need to constantly build a practice that appreciates us for who we are, for whoever we are in this moment. And whoever we are is not dependent on what somebody else thinks of us. It is dependent on how you feel about yourself in this moment. And sometimes you will feel good about yourself, and sometimes you will not feel good about yourself. But if we rely on ourselves to create that source of validation that acknowledges all those parts of us that we don't feel good about, validating those parts as well as acknowledging and validating the parts of us that we do appreciate and that we do like about ourselves, rejection becomes an opportunity. Rejection becomes an opportunity for us to be able to look at ourselves and offer ourselves more love. So I'm going to propose that rejection contains a hidden jewel, and it contains a gem on our path to self-compassion. Now, in our path to self-compassion, it is important for us to meet a very, very important character. And we're going to do a small exercise around this. I'm going to ask you to bring your pastels and your crayons and your paper. If you just need a couple of minutes to sort of arrange that, then I'm going to ask for you to bring that. Now, in our path to self-compassion, it is important for us to meet a very, very important character. And this character is the inner critic. This part of ourselves that criticizes us. This inner critic inside of us that tells us what we are doing wrong, tells us how we are not enough. Now, I'm going to ask you to just, in the same way, take a pastel, intuitively choose a color that represents the voice of your inner critic. And to just, as randomly as you can, draw on that piece of paper what your inner critic looks like and feels like. Just spend a couple of minutes drawing the form of your inner critic. And as you're drawing the form and the image of that critic, how do you feel in your body as you meet this critic? As you see this critic in front of you, how do you feel? Yeah, scary. Yes, absolutely. Angry. Yes, anxious. I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that. Hmm. Uncomfortable. I acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's confusing. Anxious. Yes. Somewhat bad. Mm-hmm. Uneasy. Yes. Now, the reason why we feel all of these things when we meet the inner critic is because we've not had a conversation with our inner critic. Is because we've not actually sat down and said, hey man, what do you want? We've internalized that somehow the critical voice that we have in our heads, in our minds, is bad, and so we must suppress it. And the uneasiness that we feel, and the anxiety that we feel, and the confusion that we feel is because of that constant suppression. Now, when we offer ourselves love, and when we say that it is important for us to practice self-compassion, it is also important for us to be compassionate towards that inner critic. To look at that inner critic and say, hey, I'm listening. What is it that you want to say to me? And to look at that inner critic without judgment. So now this is the voice of the inner critic, right? And this is what the inner critic looks like, and this is what the inner critic feels like. Now, if you were to draw an image of what that understanding, self-compassionate voice in you is, can you somewhere close to that inner critic draw what that image looks like? Just close to that image of the inner critic, that self-compassionate voice in you, that understanding voice in you. That voice in you that offers you wisdom, that offers you love, that appreciates you. Can you draw that image close to the inner critic? And be as exploratory as you can in this, be as random as you can in this. Intuitively choose a color. And just become aware of how it feels now in your body when you draw the image of this self-compassionate voice. And now just look at both of these images in front of you. Both the voice of the inner critic and the self-compassionate, understanding voice. Now, can you spend a moment just looking at both of these images? And how does it feel now in your body? How do you feel as you look at both of these images together? Mhm. Mixed emotions, yes. What is the dominant emotion? If one had to pick a dominant emotion, there are mixed emotions, definitely. If there is a dominant emotion on you right now, can you maybe type that out? Okay, felt good, confused. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Inner criticism, confident. Okay. Mm-hmm. I acknowledge that. Powerful. Sure, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Okay. Tensed is dominating me. I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that. Better than before, confident. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Can't choose between the two. Sure. And that's fine. And I urge you to just stay with that and to be with that. Now, take a separate piece of paper. And I want you to take out a couple of minutes to just write down 5 qualities that you appreciate about yourself. Any 5 qualities that you appreciate about yourself. Now, as you write down these qualities, I want you to also say out aloud as you write down these qualities that you appreciate. And if you feel comfortable doing that, I urge you to do that. Just spend a couple of moments with these qualities. They don't have to be 5. If you're not able to think of 5 qualities right now, that's fine. They can be less than 5 as well. Whatever that number is for you is fine. It's perfectly okay to feel that. It's perfectly okay to not be able to think about those qualities. How many ever they are for you, they might be 2, they might be 1, they might be 3. Just write down those qualities for yourself and just stay with them for a moment. Okay, so this is a practice that we can always come back to. This is something that you can do by yourself. Don't stress yourself about it. Don't don't be tensed about it. It's okay. It might just be right now. If you go back to this exercise, maybe 1 hour later, 2 hours later, you will be able to list down and you will be able to find those qualities that you appreciate about yourself. Okay. So now the purpose behind this and the purpose behind all of these things that we have covered and all of these things that we have spoken about is to understand the importance of an internal validation system that appreciates and understands who we are. And understanding who we are and building a world of self-compassion can only happen when we meet with those voices inside of our heads that are critical, that are self-judgmental, that do tell us that we are not enough. And if we are to sit with those parts of ourselves at any point of time, we will feel a certain way that we are not comfortable with. And if in that moment we can offer it understanding without judgment, we are then giving ourselves an opportunity for deep reflection, which in turn gives me, you, the individual power to create a world where there is more understanding, where there is more empathy, and there is a deeper knowing of ourselves. And when there is a deeper knowing of ourselves, there is a deeper understanding of what our purpose is, of what we want to do in our lives. And the two are not separate. The external world that we are a part of is not separate from the internal world. And the more we connect with ourselves and the more we understand that there are parts of ourselves that we need to see, we align ourselves more with those parts of ourselves. And the more that we align ourselves to those parts, the more aligned our purpose becomes. And all of you are in a beautiful space of self-discovery. This entire period of your life is a period of self-discovery. So I urge all of you to be uncomfortable. I urge all of you to look at those experiences that are discomforting, that are unpleasant, that do not make sense, that do make you feel confused. And know that in that moment, even if you don't get it at that moment, you will. And if you can offer yourself that kind of understanding and that level of understanding, then I promise you that there will never be any incongruence between what is it that you want to do and who you are. And when what is it that you want to do is aligned to who you are, it is a state of pure bliss. It is a state of limitless joy that we can experience. So everything that we have done today and a little bit of what I have shared with you today, I have done with schools and with educational institutions and working with children of different age groups. And I'm going to just very quickly share some of the stuff that has come up. And then we can just open up the platform for questioning, for sharing, for reflection, for anything. So Shubham, I'm just going to ask you to play the presentation that I had. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is work that I had done with a group of, well, about 14 to 15-year-olds. And I worked with them on building a curriculum around cultivating an inner self. And I was essentially arguing for the need for this to become an important aspect of schools and colleges' learning environment. Again, the goal was to come to a place of self-compassion. It was to come to a place of deeper understanding. And we looked at different practices and exercises to get there. So this is an example of one exercise where we went out for a walk in nature, and we just connected with a tree. And the only instruction, the only rule for ourselves was that we will whisper loving words to the tree, and we will embrace the tree, and we will hug the tree. And we drew what our connection with the tree was before we embraced and hugged the tree. And as you can see that these drawings, some of the drawings that this group did, there was a lot of emphasis on contours, and there was a lot of emphasis on, oh, am I getting this branch right, and does this branch look the way that it does, and maybe the charcoal is not spreading right on the paper, and all of those things, right, that we were struggling with. And we spent what I planned to be about 10 minutes, but eventually turned out to be about half an hour. And Shubham, if you can just go to the next slide. And this is what the difference in the drawings really was. And you can see that there is literally in these pictures, there is a sense of connection, that one can really get. And the charcoal was, it was just going off the paper, and it was difficult for all of them to contain the charcoal onto that sheet of paper, right? And that was wonderful to experience, because for them and for me as a facilitator and as a guide, because the conversations that followed right after that, were the kind of conversations where they spoke about what they could do in their individual capacity to help themselves, and as a result be able to come up with individual action points that they could make to conserve nature, right? So the minute that the conversation shifted from, oh, we must do this to be more loving towards ourselves, or we must do this to conserve nature, and the minute the question changed from what is it that I can do to love myself, or what is it that I can do to conserve nature, there was a more holistic conversation. And that was a conversation that came from them. And the answers and the solutions that they were seeking came as a result of the exploration, that they had. Sean, we can move on to the next slide. So in one of the practices that we had done was moving through our emotions, right, and exploring anxiety and judgment. And this was very exciting because there were a lot of people, and they were within the group that sort of felt a certain way about their anxiety, felt a certain way about the judgment and the judgmental voice in their heads. And as we really explored painting to express what this anxiety and what this judgment felt like, a lot of them were able to come up with their own answers as to why they were feeling anxious, what they can do to maybe not feel anxious. A lot of them also found reconciliation with those aspects of themselves that they were not comfortable with. So one of them said that I started with the fear that I had, with a particular fear that I had, and I thought I would not be able to express that fear, because that fear made me sort of freeze, or it didn't make me I couldn't move when I thought of that fear. But as I painted, and as I sort of expressed that fear onto the paper, I not only found that I could express that fear, but I was also able to find an answer to that fear, right? And in the role of loving ourselves, in the role of really being more compassionate and more understanding towards ourselves, it is important to find our own answers. It is important to understand that with expression, with authentic expression, lies the answer of what is it that we're really seeking for. Shubham, you can move ahead. Yeah. So these are some other examples, of the drawings, of the paintings that the group had done. We also, once we acknowledge that fear, once we acknowledge that anxiety and that judgment, what was also very important is that we were then able to acknowledge the source of abundance inside of us. We were able to say, okay, once I feel this fear and once I feel this judgment, then it is not that bad, right? And once it is not that bad, then I can open myself up to love. I can open my heart up to more love. I can open up, my heart to receiving more love. And that was essentially the purpose of, the work that we were trying to do together. So Shubham, we can go ahead. Yeah, Shubham. Okay. Now, as a part of the curriculum that we had, that I had designed and that I was working with, I categorized the selves into 4 different selves. The intuitive self, which is an experience that we had today, when we connected with the voice of wisdom and the intuitive self. The ecological self, which was essentially this part of us that intrinsically connects with nature, which is what we did through the exercise, with connecting with the tree. The independent self. So the independent self, again, which is what we did, building that internal validation system for us and knowing that we are enough in a way. And an interdependent self. So an interdependent self, once we are independent and once we feel safe and secure in ourselves, in our bodies, then we're able to create more healthy relationships with the people that surround us, right? Whether it is family or friends or relatives or whatever. So these are essentially the 4 inner selves that we worked with. Shubham, we can go on to the next slide. The pillars that I identified for creating a safe space for an inward journey were essentially comfort, authenticity, and trust. Okay, so I'm going to very quickly move into this. Comfort, if you are not comfortable with me and if I am not comfortable with you, then nothing that I say will resonate with you, nothing that you say will resonate with me, right? So comfort between people in a group and also as a facilitator was an important aspect, of the work that needed to be done. Me as a facilitator also needed to understand that I am also a participant. So just the same way that everybody is experiencing something, I am also experiencing something. And so it was important to build comfort knowing that, with that knowledge. Now, what is the difference between process-oriented work and outcome-oriented work? Now, when we go back today, we might not feel that there are 4 or 5 different action points that we have experienced. Shubham, can we go back to that slide? To the comfort, authenticity. No, the one before this. Yeah, Shubham. Yeah. No. After this. Yeah. So we might not feel that there is an outcome that we have worked towards, but what we've essentially uncovered during this process is is what is called as process oriented work, right? Where the outcome is not as important as the process. And in a culture and in a system that does sort of emphasize on outcome oriented work, it is also important for us to understand that the process is as important as the outcome. So what is really happening if I am working towards a design project, say for example, if I'm working towards a college project, there needs to be one eye on the outcome of that project, right? But what has my growth and what is my transformation been as a result of achieving that project is also as important as a project feeling achieved or as a project being achieved, right? What happens and what can happen is that when there is a dual focus on the process as well as the outcome, there is less disappointment when the outcome is not achieved or maybe not as per what we wanted it to be, right? So process and understanding how you are also responding to the work that you're doing is very important to do, which can be done through reflective drawing, through reflective journaling, through reflective writing, whatever your process is. Authenticity means that what my experience is completely true, right? So I am not bringing something that I'm not into this space, right? Now, in order to be able to bring something that I am, I need to address self-judgment, which is what we addressed. And we said that, okay, like I need to first address that critical voice inside of me. I need to address that self-judgmental voice inside of me, right? Now, the last pillar is trust, right? How can we build trust through play? How can we set internal benchmarks? Now, the beauty of this work is that there is no common benchmark that you and I are going to reach, right? So uh, where Aditi is going to reach is going to be very different from where Shubham is going to reach, right? But the point is that both of us have reached somewhere. So as long as we have created those internal benchmarks for ourselves, the we allow ourselves to build trust, and we allow ourselves to know that, okay, fine, this is what I need to do in order to be able to achieve my benchmark. So as you're setting common goals, it is also important to set what your individual goals are. What do you really want from this process? Where do you see yourself at the end of this process? And asking yourself questions like that at every stage of the work that you do can be very beneficial. Okay. So that's Shubham, we can move on to the next slide. Yeah. So again, this is something that we've already covered. We can move on to the next uh, slide. Yeah. To the next. Okay. So creating the classroom as a sacred space, right? What does it really mean now? How can we create the pillars? How can we bring the pillars of comfort, authenticity, and trust into the classroom? How do we then create a classroom where we feel comfortable expressing ourselves for who we are? We feel comfortable expressing ourselves with our peers, with our facilitators, with our faculty members, and there is a certain amount of trust, right? So what we did is we did an exercise where we imagined what the current classroom would be, right? And then you can see that a lot of them said, cozy, bright, unmotivated, tired, confused, feverish, unmotivated, dull, so done, jail, caged, imprisoned, hot, disgusting, smelly. Wow, okay, I did not see so many of these. But the point is that this is what the current classroom felt like, right, for that particular group of students. Now, what would an imagined classroom be like? How would they really want their classroom to feel like? Motivation to study, music, fairies, understanding friends, colorful, interesting class teachers, not too overdone, more boys to play, more activities outside, no partiality. So we understand through this what we as a group understood, that the qualities that we're really looking for in a classroom are the qualities of acceptance. I need to be able to be feel accepted for who I am as I come into the classroom, right? And I need to know that the people who are in my classroom are accepting me for who I am. Now, what we did as a result of this process was essentially shift the focus from the external to the internal. So we said, okay, there is nothing that we can do externally because we are not people in we are not people in positions of power, right? We are not a part of the system. We are not, there is less that we can do in terms of changing the external environment. But on the basis of what we want our classroom to be, what is it that we are capable of doing? What is it that we can do in order to be able to come maybe closer to this imagined classroom? And the resounding answer that I have received from various groups of people is that if we make a change within ourselves, we will see a change outside of us, right? So that classroom will not look as daunting or as haunting or as disturbing as it possibly might, if we are to understand how we are contributing to that classroom becoming that way, and what is it that we can do in order to be able to make that classroom in the way that we want to. And those are very simple qualities of just being accepting, of trusting, and of bringing our authentic selves. And the minute that we do that, and the moment that we do that, we allow others to do that as well. So with that, I'm just going to show you a small video that I had done as a performance for the very young and the very intelligent, that I like to call. And this is a performance around structure and flow. So this is essentially understanding how we can use performance and storytelling as ways to engage with these parts of ourselves that we have suppressed and that we have rejected in ourselves. Okay. And just by engaging with these parts of ourselves that we have suppressed and we rejected, we can maybe come into a deeper state of flow. We can come into a state of more acceptance, right? So I'm just going to play that video for you guys. Shubham, if you can play that video. Okay, thank you guys for really sticking with me through this. And now I would, just love any questions, any sharing. I don't know how much time we have left. Sorry, I've overshot the time. But if there's anybody who would like to share, please, I would love to hear from all of you.
Yes, sir, there are few questions that we have received.
Okay.
The first one is, one thing you would suggest to practice every day for feeling positive.
Okay. So I would just, the exercise that we did today around really writing down qualities about yourself that you appreciate. I would ask you to just list down maybe 1 or 2 qualities that you appreciate about yourself. Just start with 1 or 2 qualities. That you don't have to start with 5 or 10 or whatever. And just say to yourself in the mirror. That's really as simple as I can sort of make it. The idea also is just really play around with it. Let it be fun, let it be playful. Understand that you can just really create these own processes for yourself. Nobody has taught me these processes. I have not learned them from somewhere. I do this for myself. I do this by myself. So just make your own processes, and start with just appreciating yourself and saying that, hey, like I feel good about myself right now. I feel good because I'm a very creative person. So that's one quality that I really appreciate about myself, right? And be as proud as you want to about it. It's fine.
There's another question. How can we make sure we don't lose track on our journey towards self-discovery?
Yeah. Um. Well. Hmm. Well, it's an interesting question, and it's not something that can be sort of answered in a very direct way. But I would really suggest that maybe if you connected with the voice of the wise one or the intuitive voice, just have a conversation with that voice at whatever stage that you're in, and just ask. Uh, how you're feeling in that moment, and does it feel right, does it not feel right? And if it doesn't feel right for you, then I would just suggest that you trust that, in that, because the journey of self discovery is constant, right? And it's not about getting somewhere. You're going to learn, you're going to unlearn, you're going to feel like you've made tremendous progress, you're going to come back and be like, oh shit, I've not made any progress. So all of that is going to constantly keep happening. So just give yourself that patience. Keep an anchor point. I always suggest that if you pay attention to how you feel in a moment, how you're feeling in that moment in your body is never going to lie to you. So just ask yourself a question. Hey, like I'm a little confused about this. And frame it in a reflective way, and just see how your body responds to that. And you'll know what the answer for you is, and just keep going at it. Keep at the journey of self discovery. Keep questioning, keep asking, question all the questions, and really find out your own answers. Be dissatisfied with answers, don't be satisfied, and just keep pushing yourself, while being patient at the same time.
I think that's answer to almost all the questions. But keep practicing the habit and then you get used to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's a practice. So
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
We have another question, sir. She's asked that why is it easier to be compassionate towards others and than to ourselves?
Hmm. Yeah. Ah. Well, it's this is a multi-layered question, but I'm gonna, without going into a lot of it, I'm going to again suggest what I feel and what holds true for me. Right? You're most welcome to question it and not agree with it. But I think that it's a part of our cultural conditioning. We have sort of played certain roles in our lives. Especially if, and I'm just going to go ahead and say this, especially if you're a woman, you have been culturally conditioned to play a certain role, right, in a life. The notion of a woman, or the notion of the feminine in that sense, is also nurturing, compassionate, giving, right? So this idea of giving and this idea of compassionate has been glorified a lot, and accompanied with self-sacrifice and all of that, that one must do in order to be able to be a good human being in that sense. So I think what we've not learned is, or what we've not been taught is, how can we sort of turn inward and look at that same compassion that we have for somebody else, for ourselves, right? And I think we have to question in a certain sense, and I don't know if I'm going to be uh, reprimanded for this, but and I say it in the best interest. But I think question what is being offered to you, question the system, question the conditioning. If something doesn't feel right to you, keep questioning. And if you feel that there is a certain role that you've been assigned without you questioning it, right? So then question that role, because if you have not had a choice in a role that has been given to you, then I think that role is worth questioning. So to answer your question very sort of indirectly, I think you really have to look at the cultural conditioning and your conditioning that has really brought you here, where it has been glorified to give to the other, right, and not to the self. So we've not been used to that. So that's why we need to practice it. If it was something that was instilled in us, then we wouldn't have to practice it. It would just
True.
be a part of us. So I think that's what I would say. Yeah.
We have another question, sir. How do we make sure our inner compassionate self dominates over inner critic?
Yeah. So I would actually urge you to not use the word dominate, because when you use the word dominate, you are essentially saying that I am not okay with this, right? And when you're saying that you're not okay with something, that something is never going to go. Okay. So when you say that I want to overcome my inner critic, you don't have to overcome your inner critic. Whether you want to overcome your inner critic or not later on, your critical voice is something that you can decide later. But first, meet your inner critic, have a conversation with it, acknowledge it, right? And just see where that sort of takes you. And the reason I'm stressing on the word, it is not to single anybody out. It is not to say that this is wrong or anything. It is just that these words have played a role in the way that we have developed, right? So when you say dominate means you don't want something to be there. And when you don't want something to be there, then that is going to be there,
Yeah.
right? That is just the nature of the mind. So it is to understand that I am critical. I have a critical voice. I have been doing this work for a really long time, and I am nowhere. Your journey and my journey is the same. You are also on a path to self-compassion. I am also on a path to self-compassion, right? So I also have that self-critical voice. All of us have that self-critical voice. It is just about understanding that, okay, like I have this voice inside of me. I want to sit with it and I want to understand it. Now when I feel like, okay, fine, you know what, like I'm done, I've understood it, I've acknowledged it, this is what I feel like I need to do, right? So then you create patterns in your life, you create actionable patterns in your life that are not coming out of avoiding the inner critic, but are coming out of acknowledging the inner critic and saying, okay, listen, I got to focus on other things, man, I'm sorry, right? So you create, you're not saying that, okay, I'm going to avoid this voice of the inner critic and I'm going to focus on all of those things. That is not the path that I am suggesting. The path that I'm suggesting is that you acknowledge the voice of the inner critic, you meet with it, you look at it first completely, and then you see what you want to do about it. So in your conversations with yourself, don't use the word dominate, is
Yes.
what I would suggest.
I don't think so. We have any questions, further questions in the chat box. If any, you guys can please put them in. Also, there's one more question that I have received, that is, generally we tend to leave the things midway. So, how one should like cope up with it?
Yeah. So consistency is something that again is a practice that you need to do,
Yeah.
right? So guys, there is no like there isn't a
Shortcut.
there's not a customizable solution to this, right? It is about understanding that consistency is also a practice, that you have to practice consistency. I would urge you to look at what it is within you that is not allowing you to be consistent. Okay, so just turn that lens inward. Why am I not being consistent? What is it within me that is stopping me from moving forward? The minute that you ask yourself that question, instead of running directly to a judgment and saying I am not consistent, I am not a consistent person. Okay, you might not be a consistent person, that's fine, but what is it that is stopping you from being consistent? So the minute that you turn that lens inward, you stop judging yourself. And then it becomes about a, so say for example, I am petty. Okay. I have made this judgment about myself. I am petty. Now I can leave it at that. And I can say, okay, I am petty. And now because I know somewhere that being petty is not okay, right? So I must suppress this petty part of me. I must suppress this petty aspect of me, because if people find out that I'm petty, I will not be accepted. That is one way of looking at it, which is fine. The other way of looking at it is, I am petty because. I always say because is a very, very good question to start with. I am petty because I feel envious about somebody's worth. Now you can stop there, right? You can stop there. Or you can attach another because to it. I am petty because I feel envious about another person's worth because I don't feel okay about my own worth. Now, when I give myself that opportunity to say that in this moment, oh shit, I don't feel a sense of self worth right now, right? I'm not feeling a sense of self worth. You're giving yourself a chance to cultivate a sense of self worth. You're giving yourself a chance to say that, okay, listen, you know what? There are 5 things that I can do in order to be able to cultivate this sense of self worth. But if you say that I don't feel self worth, I mean, I don't have it, I am just petty. You have essentially judged yourself there and you have not given yourself a chance to really look deeper within. And when you look deeper within, you will get the answer and you will also get an answer to the kind of action that you must take in order to be able to do what it is that you want to do.
I I think we're done with the questions here, Aditi. Do we have any other questions in the chat box?
Yes. No, we don't have any further questions.
Okay. So on that note, I would like to thank Mr. Sahil for taking out their precious time and sharing such valuable strategies and deep insights that will help us progress in our entrepreneurial journey. I would also like to thank Pooja ma'am, Naveen sir, Amit sir, and the students for taking out some of your precious time for attending this session. We hope that our alumni journey inspired you and all the valuable information will help you in overcoming your entrepreneurial roadblocks and achieve success.